Hey everybody, welcome to Somewhere in October. I'm Alex, and I'm doing a review of Candyman today. So the first watch is a Patreon exclusive. If you want to be a Patreon member, you can head over there, link in description. If not, we're going to go over my review. I will say, out of all the movies I've watched so far, and listen, I have been on max. I had movie burnout this weekend, but of all the movies I've watched so far, this is the first one that really scared me, like in a very dark way. I had to pause at one point and just take a breather and collect my thoughts. There will be spoilers in this. At the end of the year when I rank all my videos, I'll do it without spoilers so everyone can be included, but you should go watch it, the Candyman 1992 version to be specific, and let's get into it. This movie starts out strong. There's a monologue. I don't think this movie would have been the same if Tony Todd was not the voice. Let's make that very clear. He has this monologue at the beginning about gutting you and about shedding innocent blood, and I was just like, okay, this is going to be the real deal. And this kind of had the perfect concoction of what I want in a horror movie because I'm really into the lore, the story, and this movie actually dives into the concept of modern folklore. I mean, we have someone studying it, we have a professor giving a talk on it. Candyman himself is a modern folklore. It's something that people are really in belief in and obey by. And it has a very interesting take on belief. I love when a villain can lose their power or their steam when they're not feared or not believed in. I think that is a really good complement between supernatural and humanity, and I really enjoy that. So we have an intro scene where someone's retelling a tale, but we get to see the Candyman in action. It's the Bloody Mary concept, which I'm familiar with, and you say his name 5 times in a mirror, and you turn off the lights. I don't really know if you need to actually turn off the lights, but he appears. And when she says it the 5th time, I'm like, is there going to be a delay? Is he just going to haunt them? No, that man appeared and just... It also sets the tone because we find out he also killed the baby. We see pretty clearly this movie's not going to tiptoe around anybody's feelings. It's going to get right into it. So we meet Helen, and Helen is doing a thesis on the Candyman. And she's working with her friend Bernadette. There's a good plot build of how passionate she is about this in terms of whether that is the Candyman lore itself or getting the story for the thesis or proving herself. Either way, we really get to see that Helen is not going to stop at anything. Bernadette is the one that tries to reel her in, and Helen's like, no, I'm going all in. It costs her. It definitely costs her. And we meet her husband. He is clearly having an affair with a student, dirty dirtbag. And yeah, he gets it at the end. I don't ever think cheating is a reason to get it, but in the horror movie sphere where this is a safe place, kind of glad he got it. Anyway, we'll get to that. So Bernadette and Helen say Candyman in the mirror. Bernadette stops at the 4th one, but Helen says it. But he doesn't appear. So I'm thinking he doesn't actually have to come out and kill you? Like, what is going on here? Why did he wait for Helen? You know, Helen. It was always you, Helen. There's definitely a deeper story that I might need to rewatch to understand. It seems like it all connects to his original story. And this is where we also get introduced to, there's a lot of undertones or themes, and this is what I like. I like when you can put modern discussions in movies. I don't like when you put modern elements. That was kind of confused on my unpopular opinions video or my opinions video, but this is what I mean. I like a theme. In the undertones of the story is gentrification, racial inequality, inequality in general, and then racism in general. And we learn that Candyman's story was he was a slave and he got the white woman pregnant. A tale as old as time, where he is then brutally punished for it. So they cut off his hand, which is why he has a hook, which sometimes when you see horror movies or like scary TV and someone has a hook, it's like a stump with a hook. His is gory and bloody, okay? It's not just like, haha, I have a hook. It's, oh god, he has a hook. We also find out that's actually how he died. They stung him to death with bees, which was cool because that calls back to the beginning. I was wondering why bees were such an important aspect into this. That comes back around as well. So they go investigate the building where Ruthie Jean, this was a girl who was a victim of the Candyman, they go investigate where she was murdered, and this is when Helen is taking pictures and she's crawling through the spaces and she's kind of finding his area. I guess this is where he stays or where he has felt safe in terms of belief, in terms of the people. Like there was candy with razor blades in them. I don't know if this was some kind of offering or if that was just a plot point I missed, but it looked like it was kind of a shrine for protection. Everybody living there kind of knew and were afraid to speak about him and didn't want to be involved. So she's poking around asking questions, and we meet Anne-Marie. Brilliant acting by Anne-Marie. And she has a child and a dog. This becomes very, unfortunately, important. Before, there's a lot of setup and storytelling, but what happens is Helen goes back and wants this little boy to show her around. And this is when things start to turn, because the Candyman, or an imposter, kind of like the bad boy of the neighborhood, impersonates Candyman, uses a hook and everything, just so people will fear him and he has some kind of authority. Why this is so important is he attacks Helen, and they go to the police and they catch him. When you catch a physical person who's calling himself the Candyman, people start to feel safe, so the belief goes down. And this is when Candyman really starts to come for Helen, because he needs his belief to get back. This is when I got a little bit lost, and in my first watch you start to hear me complain a little bit, but you know me, the yapper, I should have just shut my mouth, because this is actually so important. He's going after Helen, but he has to set it up in a way that people will believe in him again. But he starts to frame Helen for things, and that's where I get confused, because then we get this dynamic of it's Helen against Candyman against everyone because they think she's crazy. And I often don't like that trope in movies, because it just gets too complicated. There's so many side plots, and I just want more of the villain. But it's a reason. There's a reason for it. I still am actually not completely clear why Helen. I get that her picture was like on the mural after, but was that added? Does she embody, is she an ancestor of the white woman? Like, does it all tie back? I think so, but I'm not too sure. Helen wakes up, and this is when I had to pause. This is when the movie got really good for me, because I was like, holy crap, I'm not ready for this. She wakes up covered in blood, the baby's gone, the dog is decapitated, which, and she's attacking Anne-Marie to defend herself, but the police come in and she just looks like a butcher murderer. They're like, where's the baby? And she doesn't know. This keeps happening. Candyman jumps out of her medicine cabinet, and in this scene, Bernadette gets killed. When they show that, they show no mercy. So then Helen is admitted into a mental hospital. And this is again where I'm starting to be like, I don't love this. Because now she's in a mental hospital. I get that Candyman's appearing to her and there's elements, but I want more of Candyman. And because no one believes in him and it's just Helen right now, I start to feel like frustrated, because that's who I am as a viewer. But again, I should have just shut my mouth, because it's important to the story. This is when things get really, really crazy. So in the mental hospital, she finds out that she's been there for a month. She's been highly medicated. She's like trying to prove herself, because they're watching the cameras. They don't see the Candyman. And she's like, listen, I can prove it. Says Candyman 5 times. Wild. But I also do appreciate that she's now becoming a little bit dependent on Candyman. But she still is thinking about her husband, Trevor. So Bernadette's dead. She doesn't have him. She doesn't really have anybody else besides Trevor. But when she's getting out of the asylum, she still has that connection. So the Candyman guts the doctor from the back and releases her. I'm like, oh, she's going to get caught again. They're going to think she did it. But no, she gets to escape. And then she gets to her home, which is being repainted, with Trevor and that little young one who, when she comes in and she's like, oh my god, I'm so scared. Girl, you put yourself in this situation. Anyway. And we get a great callback from the scene, because she says something along the lines of, do you see something that scares you, or are you scared of something? That comes back in an excellent way. So this is when things really start to shift. And Candyman also starts to reveal that people thinking Helen is a monster is part of his belief. He's building Helen into a story. So not only does he want to be believed again, but he wants Helen to be an integral part of that story. So then I get to appreciate that a little bit more. And now that she's cut off from Trevor, so now that it was her against the villain, against everybody, and now she has nobody, she's very dependent on Candyman. So she goes to his lair and he's sleeping. Sleeping is wild. Like, I don't know what his being is. Like, is he a ghost, but he can die? Like, I don't understand. So this is when she's like, okay, if you save the baby, you can have me. And she sacrifices herself. So we're still seeing humanity in her, because I thought we were losing her for a little bit. When she knocks out the nurse, I'm like, oh, she's going full crazy. This is a very, very disturbing scene. I thought he was gonna gut her, but no. He just kisses her with a mouth full of bees. Ugh. That scene is crazy, crazy. And one of my Patreoners, Roderick, informed me that that was real. They used real bees, and they actually had to pay Todd for how many times he got stung. Crazy. But when that happens, she hears the baby crying, and it's out in the bonfire thing they've been building. So we're starting to realize, even with Helen, he's not trustworthy. So I don't really know what his end motive is. If he wants Helen, like, what kind of connection will they have in the immortal life or belief, the folklore, whatever. I'm gonna have to watch the next one. But she crawls to the bonfire and he goes in after her, and she has the baby. So she still has the hook, the weapon that she found that she was going to use to kill Candyman when he was sleeping. So when she goes into the bonfire with that hook on the quest to get the baby, the little boy just sees a hook going in there, and he's like, okay, Candyman's in there. And I thought it might just end with her saving it or something, and then the belief is there because he's seen the hook. But no, it gets a little bit crazy. This is more of a recap than a review, but that's how I do it because I want to share my thought process through everything I'm watching. So she saves the baby, and Candyman burns. And I know part of his lore was you have to burn him. So he burns in the bonfire, but Helen also gets crazy burns all over her, especially her head, and she dies as well. And I get really choked up at the scene when they're having the funeral. I don't get choked up at this. This was my what are you doing moment, is when Trevor is there with his mistress at the funeral. Lord, if anybody ever cheats on me and shows up at my funeral with the mistress, I'm coming back with Candyman. Anyway. So they actually buried the hook with Helen. And this was part of the story because in the bonfire, he was saying, like, we are going to burn together, our ashes are going to be together, and we're going to become one in this belief, this story, this immortality. And that kind of happens now because the hook is buried with her. So I do know how this sequel is going to lead up, but we get a hint at it because poor Trevor is crying his eyes out in the bathroom. He is so sad. You know, he didn't appreciate her enough, and now she's gone. So he cries for her in the mirror. He says Helen 5 times. I don't know if he says that because he believes in Candyman or he's just like, Helen, Helen. But she appears, and we get this excellent callback line, and she guts him like a fish. Iconic ending. I love this movie. I love the aerial shots with the music. Sometimes it sounded like a carnival. Like a lot of the Sweet Tooth, there were so many like candy references. I'm still not clear on what the candy of it all is. But this was just a really amazing movie. I mean, perfectly well shot. The story was told beautifully. The visuals, the acting, like everything is perfect. I just couldn't give it a 5-star because for me, it wasn't a movie that I was like, I need to watch this again and again. I still need more. So I think that if I get more out of the sequels and they're as well done, it'll be a 5-star for me. I just needed more of Candyman. I needed more questions answered. Maybe my mind will change on a rewatch, but this is a great movie. For my basically first introduction into, let's say, slashers or franchises. Is he a slasher? I'm still learning, guys. It was amazing. I would recommend this movie to anybody. Helen was really good acting too. I often liked, this will be my last comment I make because I'm going on, but I often like when they would just zoom in on her face and she would be remembering, seeing, or hearing things, and it would focus on her expression, but we would hear things. The way that that could be more effective than actually seeing it, it's really fascinating when people know when to use gore, when to use shock value, and when to do shock on an emotional level. And I think this does it really well. Like, there's a lot of story here that I want to get into. I really love this, and I might change my mind on a rewatch, but it's just 4.5 stars for me, but just is not the word to use. That's an amazing score. This is my rating system, you know? I'll see you in the next one.